right, people, here we go. So tomorrow is the big day. The Defiance books, 3 of them plus a novella, comes out tomorrow. And I'm giving you guys the first peek at a scene from the new novella, which is what I call the Lost Chapters. This was material I wrote originally back between 2008 and 2012. And because it was considered backstory, all the editors told me to cut it. But I think I think if you love the Defiance characters, I think, like I do, I think you'll enjoy the novella. The scene that I'm going to read is, it comes directly after the scene in which Hannah confesses her pregnancy to the church. I don't want to give too much away in that scene. It's pretty brutal. But this is the scene immediately after that. This is between John and Naomi. And it was difficult writing a guy I knew who was destined to die. So bear that in mind, because Naomi really did truly love him. Long about midnight, Naomi awoke and realized John was not in the bed. After a few minutes sleepily considering his whereabouts, she thought she heard the rocker creaking on the front porch. He was most likely down there praying and pondering. He carried so much on his shoulders. He'd married Naomi, but had become a brother to Rebecca after Ben's death, and a father to Hannah after influenza had taken their parents. Naomi appreciated her beloved's willingness to bear the girl's burdens and loved him for it. Too often, however, he was willing to carry the weight alone. She was strong too, and sometimes he forgot that. Tonight she wouldn't let him. Resolute, she grabbed her robe from the foot of the bed and headed outside. To Naomi's surprise, the drier air of the spring evening had faded, and the night had turned unseasonably muggy. Crickets and frogs chirped frantically, their songs loud and strong. It hadn't rained in over a week now. She realized all the signs were there for a hot, sticky summer. She sat down in her own rocker beside John and wondered suddenly if she knew what her beloved might be thinking. John had been so excited a few days ago over the most recent letter from his brother Matthew, yet another invitation to join him out in California. But then John had inexplicably dropped all conversations about it. For some reason, Naomi didn't think it was because he was preoccupied with Hannah. She thought it meant he was seriously considering Matthew's invitation, especially in light of tonight's reception at church. What was California like? Was it humid like North Carolina? Did they have crickets out there? Did it rain much? John sighed in the darkness, the sign that he was about to share his thoughts. However, when the silence dragged on, she prompted him. So? California. His bluntness caught her off guard. Oh, she lifted a shoulder. Do you mean to move us there? He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his thighs. He'd come outside wearing only his pants, and his suspenders slipped off one shoulder. That wouldn't be my decision alone. But just for the sake of discussion, what do you think about the idea? What do you think Rebecca and Hannah would say to it? He laced and unlaced his fingers several times, waiting for her reply. She blew out of breath, ruffling her bangs. Just what did she think about that? I don't know. I haven't had a chance to give it any thought. That was a lie. She'd seen the way John had reacted to his brother's letters and the faraway look that grabbed hold of him when he read them. Well, what I mean is, I haven't really thought about what it would entail. After what happened at church tonight, though, I guess it's worth pondering. It could mean a new start for all of us, but especially Hannah. If it came up, we could just say Billy left her. Never make mention that he wasn't her husband. Then we wouldn't be lying. True enough, Naomi agreed. Maybe a town out west, one not so wrapped up in its own sense of righteousness, might be more open-minded about forgiveness anyway, if it came up. But California? It's so far away, she argued, then countered, but I know you'd like to see Matthew again. I had another thought as well, he said carefully. Naomi waited, but the silence dragged out. This must be a doozy, she thought. If Paige was willing to pay $5,000 just to get Hannah out of town, maybe he'd pay top dollar for our farm and Rebecca's, just to get rid of the lot of us. Now, there was an idea that took some dissecting. Naomi consciously practiced thinking before speaking, since she had failed so miserably at that in church. Her initial response was that she didn't like the idea. It seemed, well, vengeful. She had too much pride to want Page's money anyhow. She was surprised that John was considering this idea and said as much. You mean to gouge him? He screwed his mouth up into a tight frown as if she'd offended him. I've considered the fact that while he thinks money can buy away his troubles, paying more than he wants to for something will really stick in his craw. I can ask the high-end fare, he emphasized, or offer the farms to Ben Walker. That would also stick in Page's craw. Naomi knew Walker had ambitions of his own. He'd gone in on the Page Walker Hotel with Frank and liked the taste of money. He had goals of making Carrie his domain one day and snuffing out the Page legacy. John, if we were to do that, sell out, we would need to act quickly. Hannah's 2 months along, close to 3. An overland journey is not something she should take on after about 6 months. He nodded, adding, and we'd need to be across the Rockies by July 4th, or risk getting stuck in the Sierras in winter. The news of the Donner Party almost 30 years prior had shaken the nation to its core, and even decades later, still haunted the minds of those who sought to travel west. Time was truly of the essence if they made this leap. It's a lot to take in, John. I don't know what to say, other than we all need to pray about it. He ran his hands through his hair, sat back, and closed his eyes. Naomi realized that if she felt under pressure to make these life-altering decisions, how much heavier was the burden on her husband. He'd not bargained for extended family when he married Naomi, but he'd never complained once. Smiling mischievously, she rose and stood before him. She knew the perfect way to relax him, and the woman in her needed to be held. Come to bed with me, she said, extending her hand. When he didn't move or even look up at her, she said it again, but more enchantingly this time. Come to bed with me, and let's pretend that we don't have any earth-shaking decisions to make. At least none tonight. Without warning, he took her hand and pulled her into his lap. With an inscrutable face, he studied hers. Naomi frowned, unable to read his thoughts in the moonlight. They were soulmates, a fact she'd never doubted, and they'd always pretty much known what the other was thinking. But tonight, there was much more going on behind those hazel eyes than she would probably ever guess. He touched her cheek softly with a strong, calloused hand. Oh, how she loved this man she called her soulmate and friend. Strong, steady, determined. If anything ever happened to you... He trailed off. What are you talking about? She asked, a little spooked by the sound of fear in his voice. Nothing, he said, looking down. Just for a second, I had that eerie feeling, like somebody walked over my grave. Naomi felt the stab of fear in her abdomen. Don't say that. She touched his hand, still pressed to her cheek. Don't say anything bad like that. We're going to live to be 100 together. Seductively, slowly, she guided his hand down her neck, across her breast, and to her waist. She could feel the heat coming off him in waves. Come, my darling. We're burning moonlight. Bye, guys. Hope you enjoy it.